Booked for Murder by Shannon Symonds, Book 1 in the Balefire Bay Cozy Mystery Series. Some journeys take us far from home. Some adventures lead us to our destiny. C.S. Lewis. Chapter 1, When the End is Really the Beginning. Ivy Kelly's hands shook as she carefully packed everything she had in the world into one backpack. After closing the dresser's bottom drawer, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror and was startled by the face looking back at her. New name, new hairstyle, new anger, new heartbreak had changed her. She frowned and pointed at her reflection and gave the person she'd become a talking to she didn't deserve in an empty room. What did you do with a girl who knew everything? You made so many bad decisions. You ruined my plans, altered my destiny, and my hair. He took everyone you loved, including... Don't think about them. You'll fall apart. Keep it together. She released a deep breath. She hated crying, but right now all she wanted to do was ugly cry. She wanted to throw herself on the wood floor and punish herself for all the mistakes that left her isolated in a room that reflected her new life, colorless, sterile, and cold. She leaned over the dresser and looked closer into the eyes that looked back at her. She searched for the light that used to make her brown eyes sparkle. She saw tears pooling in flat black eyes. It's all my fault. Her shoulders slumped. She closed her eyes and her head fell. What have you become? Who are you, Ivy Olivia Kelly? Ivy wiped her eyes at the back of her hand and opened the last dresser drawer. A small photo of him slid in the empty space, sending a jolt straight through her. It started another adrenaline storm, created by what she knew was just paper and ink. His beautiful face. She hated the shreds of love that had taken up residence in her heart. I loved the idea of us. Well, until your skin peeled back and the truth crawled out. I should have hired an exorcist instead of a therapist. I will never understand why I believed every lie you told me. I'm a research librarian, for cake's sake. The picture was of her pie birthday party when she turned 33 and 14 days old. She loved the kind of math humor that only a geek would appreciate. Memories of their last days together scrambled her thoughts. I'm running from my car to the cliff's edge where he waits for me. Below, their car burns. He turns. He smiles. In that instant, her trust was shattered. Why did I keep this? I should tear it up. Then she remembered. She kept it in case he found her and she survived. It would help identify her attacker. Hiccups, familiar and always unwelcome, broke the silence in the room. She closed her eyes and tried to hold her breath. She knew the drill well. Every time she was anxious, hiccups. She gulped air and held her breath again, willing them to stop. She recited the science behind hiccups from experience. Cold, hard facts. Hiccups are only a violent contraction of a group of muscles. Hold your breath. Oh, for cake's sake, Ivy, get a hold of... After gulping air, she held her breath, willing them to stop. She tucked his photo into a pair of socks with a picture of her parents, a credit card, and her old driver's license. Then she shoved the socks deep in her green backpack and zipped it closed. Darlene would be furious if she knew she'd saved the photos and ID, but Darlene didn't really know what Ivy was dealing with. Ivy hadn't disclosed every evil thing her ex and his friends had done to her and to others. If she had, Darlene would never have let her stay. The backpack was her favorite carry-on bag. She yearned for the good times before her marriage to Ian. Before and after Ian. Before and after COVID were new time markers in Ivy's life. Before, when she wasn't working in the library, she spent months in Europe with her college friends, touring famous libraries and bookstores, or hiking with her roommate and best friend. She would miss her best friend the most, but reaching out to her could get them both killed. It was hard to think about living without love. It was even harder to imagine trusting anyone after this. She shook her head to stop the memories of how naive she'd been. Her parents had warned her to slow down when she started dating Ian, but as always, she charged full speed ahead. The pack and the photos were the only sentimental things she brought from her home. She left behind her personal collection of rare books and her work in the university library. All of her life, when she wanted to escape reality, she'd immersed herself in literature and lived someone else's life. She loved the smell of a new book. She would open them and inhale her favorite scent. She missed staying up all night solving mysteries before Sherlock or Miss Marple gathered their suspects to reveal the killer. Leaving behind her books was harder than leaving him. I could get used to ebooks, she thought, and then laughed softly at the absurdity of her lie. The tree outside her window was bare, except for the falling snow gathering on its branches. She zipped up her coat and put on a black beanie, wishing she had gloves. She scanned the white walls and the wood floors of the empty room. She looked under the bed and checked the closet, making sure she didn't leave anything behind. She put the pack on and adjusted the straps. It wasn't very heavy. Ironic, she thought. All those years of school, traveling, and collecting my precious books have ended with everything I own fitting into this bag. I've become a 33-year-old bag lady. The door to the bedroom opened, and her friend Sadie's smiling, freckled face peeked in. Oh, good, you're still here. Sadie's 7-year-old son pushed the door open and wrapped his arms around her legs. Don't leave us, Andy said. Before she could respond, Sadie gave her a motherly hug. We're so excited for you. Andy and I made you a sack lunch. She handed her a brown bag that no doubt held one of her famous chocolate chip cookies and Andy's favorite crust-free PBJ. He's going to miss your bedtime stories, Sadie said. I made a picture for you, Andy said. He pulled a folded piece of paper out of his pocket and smoothed it out on the bed before he handed it to her. She took Andy's wrinkled drawing and studied it. His careful crayon picture on lined notebook paper was also a wonderful likeness of the house, with stick figure people holding hands under the oak tree in the front yard. It said, to Ivy, love, with the E backwards, Andy J. It's lovely. She squatted down and hugged Andy back. I'll keep it forever. Do you know where you're going? Sadie asked. Darlene said not to tell anyone. Just let me get back to the sea before his friends help him find me. The memory of his drinking buddies sent shivers down her spine. After a short, sharp knock, Darlene, the aging house manager, barged in, sending Ivy's heart rate skyrocketing. A few days after meeting Darlene, Ivy decided she was likely the person responsible for creating the redheaded stereotype. Fierce and definitely in charge, she left waves of passionate anger in her wake. Gladys, her shadow, shuffled in behind her. Darlene immediately snatched Andy's picture out of Ivy's hands. Sadie's eyes widened and she took Andy's hand. We better let you go. Andy cried with arms outstretched, begging Ivy to pick him up. Sadie scooped him up, glanced at Darlene, gave Ivy one last desperate look, and carried him out of the room and down the hall. A tear escaped as she listened to his cries for the last time. Darlene's fiery eyes narrowed before she waved Andy's art in Ivy's face. Ivy's stomach dropped. She took an involuntary step back. You can't take this. House rules. You can't remove anything from the shelter with anyone else's name on it. Something like this could get us all killed, she barked. After crumpling it up, she handed it to Gladys. Sorry, Ivy said. She looked down, masking her anger. Darlene put a small phone and a charger in her empty hands. Here's your new cell. It's a burner. I put your phone number on the back of it. Raising a brow, she looked down her long nose and over her cat-eye glasses at Ivy. Grateful, Ivy turned the plain white phone over and looked at her new number on a neatly typed label. Is it traceable? If I buy minutes with cash, could someone know what city they came from? Ivy asked. Darlene folded her skinny arms. Taller than Ivy, she rolled her eyes. No, that's why they call it a burner phone. Although, just when we think we've gathered all of our bases, someone creates an app and we have to start all over again. Isn't that the truth? I studied artificial intelligence. For years, I've been able to put a photo in a Google search and find all the pictures and posts of that person, Ivy said. That's why we dyed your black hair that ghastly brown color you chose and changed its shape. The hairdressers that volunteer for us told me your hair looks nice. Her sentence trailed off as she sneered, reached out and touched Ivy's long brown and gold ombre hair, styled in beach waves. The phone, the hair. I can't thank you enough, Ivy said. Really. Darlene shrugged. You can thank the army of volunteers and our donors by paying it forward and donating something yourself in the future. Where can I find a place that sells minutes? Ivy asked. Shaking her head, Darlene said, do listen. Most any store like Walmart will sell you minutes. Do not create your email account until you're on the road. Ivy nodded and tried to maintain a pleasant look while Darlene treated her like she was an idiot. I've programmed in the national hotline number. That will link you with shelters across the country. They might take you in. Darlene tipped her chin and rose her brows. Do you understand? If I can't find a place, can I call you? Ivy asked. She looked at Gladys, who was nodding yes and grinning. Darlene gave Gladys a sharp look. Talking with her hands, Darlene rose to her full height. Don't call us. You've already stayed far too long. However, we may call you if we feel something happening here will impact your safety. Ivy held her breath. She was sure she was ready to leave, but her stomach wasn't on board with her plan. Darlene towered over Ivy. You must be grateful. Putting your documents in order was a nightmare. You should have your birth certificate, ID with protected address, social security card, and your university records in your new name. Ivy tried to smile. I have them packed and ready to go. And you can't know how much it meant to me to have a diploma in my new name. Thank you, Ivy said. You're quite welcome. Darlene handed Ivy a printed piece of paper folded around cash. Here is a train ticket to South Station in Boston and $200 in cash for your next bus. I could give you additional money, but your personal funds are more than enough to sustain you. We have women here who have nothing. Ivy squared her shoulders. I know I have privilege and money, but none of that saved me. I had nothing when I arrived. Ugh, my hands are shaking again. Gladys smiled over Darlene's shoulder. You're a smart woman, Ivy. Everything's going to be just fine. You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. May I hug you? Ivy didn't want to be touched. It made her nervous. She closed her eyes, knowing it was coming, whether she liked it or not. Gladys enveloped her with soft arms that smelled of pancake syrup and coffee. Ivy stepped back out of the embrace, smiled weakly, and looked down at her black boots. Darlene folded her arms and frowned. Your bus leaves in 2 hours. Have you cleared the room of any personal items? She nodded. Raising one brow to amazing heights, Darlene looked down at Ivy. What is your name? Looking up Darlene's nose, she took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Ivy Olivia Kelly. Darlene's brows drew together, making the wrinkle between her eyes into an intense furrow. She wagged her finger at Ivy. You can't say it like that. People won't believe you. You pick the name out. It should roll off your tongue. And no one introduces themselves using their middle name. She pointed at Ivy. I have invested a lot of time and money on you. You're going to get yourself killed before you even get on the bus. She folded her arms, waiting for Ivy's response. I'm sorry, Ivy said, chewing her lip. She looked past Darlene and Gladys at the snow falling outside the window. Avoiding their eyes, she tried to regain her composure. She was going to miss Sadie and little Andy, and even the battle axe Darlene. As awful as Darlene was, she'd given her a safe place to stay. Ivy had slept better in this room than she had in the previous 2 years. The home she left behind had become her prison. She couldn't go back. She knew she was hurting him, but it was his fault. Or was it? Lies, so many lies. It was hard to think straight sometimes. She shut the struggle down by feeling her feet on the floor. It doesn't matter. It's over. Darlene began checking the drawers and under the bed, making sure the room was clean and ready for the next occupant. Ivy knew the drill. They would ask her to sign an agreement stating that anything left behind belonged to the shelter. Gladys followed Darlene around the room with a clipboard and pencil, ready to note any housekeeping mistake Ivy may have made. Darlene's angry paranoia sent Ivy's mind down a familiar path. a memory of one of Ian's usual toxic word baths. Everything was her fault. Her eyes closed with the unbearable weight of fear mixed with the shame he had trained her to feel. She forced her eyes open and released a deep, jagged breath. Every cell in her body wanted to run. She couldn't stand Darlene for one more minute because she reminded Ivy of him. Run. She adjusted her coat. Hopefully, she'd find a place by the sea of her own where she could heal. If she could just get to the waves and sand, she could breathe again. We're not done here, Darlene said. She took a hold of her arm. Ivy yanked it out of her grasp and strode to the door. Where are you going? Darlene demanded, hands on her hips. As far away from this, all of this, as I can, forever, Ivy said, and shut the door behind her. Hiccup! Oh, good gobstoppers. I'm Shannon Symonds, and I'm the author, and this is chapter 1 of the first of the Balefire Mysteries, which means lighthouse. I worked for years with women who were in and out of a shelter, and there's a lot of reality in chapter 1. I relate to Ivy. I have a little hiccup issue. I have some relatives with a little hiccup issue. We learned from one of their college class that it might be Tourette's, but we just think it's embarrassing sometimes. I hope you enjoy the book. Every chapter that I put up on YouTube is me practicing and reading and finding errors. So it's fun to share it with you. And thanks for spending time with me. We'll put up a chapter every week. Getting ready for launch. Launch day is coming.